Hey everybody, this is Stitch 1993, back again here with my wife Shelby, and we're talking about movies that we own. And because it is the end of September, that means starting tomorrow, unless you've already been celebrating it since July 4th ended,
Like me.
it is Halloween time, which means we're going to talk about horror movies. And as I said in the last video, we are talking specifically about the actual horror movies. Sci-fi horror movies, for the most part, will be in their own section. There will be a couple sci-fi movies in this area as well, but the ones that are more horror driven or more thriller driven is what we will be talking about today. The ones that are more sci-fi driven, like Alien or Nope, those will be later down the line when we talk about our sci-fi films.
Also, we do have several horror movie series, and those will be in the series section when we get to those. Those will be the last things we talk about.
Yes.
So, stuff like Scream will not be in this list.
Right. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about our horror movies, and this is all going to be just one video because in October, when we start our next video, it's going to be holiday movies. So, but we're putting the cart in front of the horses. So, first movie we're going to talk about is 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I actually very much enjoy. I actually probably enjoy it more now than I do the original Cloverfield movie. The original does have a good place in my heart, as we'll get to it when we talk about it. But this one, of course, if you know any history, I believe it did not start off as a Cloverfield movie. It just kind of had an interesting script, and they're like, well, why don't we just, kind of tie it into the Cloverfield story as a whole? So that's what they did. But it's a great, more really thriller drama than a horror movie, although it does have more horror in it as the film goes on. But it's got a great cast list with John Goodman and Mary Elizabeth Winstead. John Gallagher Jr. is also really good in it. It's a very, as people would call it, basically a consolidated story, or as I was told, it was called a story in a bottle, where it all takes place in one location. For the most part, movies like this, other movies like this would be like 12 Angry Men, or like a lot of Hitchcock movies are like that, where they all take place in one single area. So, but going back to Cloverfield Lane, definitely, I wouldn't call it so much scary as just frightening, because she is kidnapped. So, but it's kidnapped in a very interesting situation. He's not kidnapping her because of the implications. It's other things. And for the whole movie, you're wondering, for John Goodman's character, is he crazy or did something actually go down? And the title kind of does give it away, unfortunately, because it is 10 Cloverfield Lane. You automatically know, yes, something is going down. And that's where I feel the movie kind of falters. Is it probably would have been better if it was literally titled anything else, because as soon as you say, oh, it's a Cloverfield movie, and you've already seen the first Cloverfield, well, you know that an alien invasion happened, so you know that he's telling the truth, but
He is also crazy.
he is also crazy. But your thoughts?
So I do like this one more than Cloverfield. The issue I have with Cloverfield, we'll get to that when we get to the movie.
Yeah.
But I like the claustrophobia of
Yes.
this one. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great in this. She's great in pretty much everything
Right.
she's in. And we have another one of hers in this list further down.
We do.
But for me, what sells this is just how unhinged John Goodman is in it. He plays a great villain.
He really plays. I mean, he's played villain in the past, and every time he plays villain, it's always like this unhinged.
So good.
And I love it when they say John Goodman's going to, because you know you're going to get a great time out of that actor.
And I didn't see this one until you showed it to me, because the only Cloverfield thing I knew was the first one, and I didn't really care for it. And you're like, no, this is like 10 times better than the original. You're gonna love it. It's that kind of horror movie feel you like when it's not a straight up slasher. I do love the slashers, but when it comes to just like the psychological element of it, it's kind of what I like to go for horror movies, and that's what got you to sell it to me. Well, that's how you sold it to me. It's like it was more on a psychological level, so I was down for it. I loved it.
So, I'll let you start with the next film, because this is all you.
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of an unpopular opinion for some people. This is my favorite, and quite honestly, the only Stephen King adaptation that I truly love. I enjoy some of the others, and most of them I'm not a huge fan of, but 1408 is my absolute favorite Stephen King adaptation, period. It is John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's so good. There are so many moments in this movie that catch you off guard, and there's one particular scene. I'm not going to spoil it, because I know this isn't a super popular movie, so there's going to be a lot of you who haven't seen it, but there is a moment in this movie that not only just knocks you off balance because of how kind of creepy it is, but it also tugs at your heartstrings at the exact same time, and it devastated me the first time I watched it, and it even creeped you out.
Yeah, so I did not grow up with this film. I didn't grow up with a lot of Stephen King films. So, like, I grew up with the 1980s television version of It. I did grow up with stuff like Shawshank Redemption, and also eventually some of his other films. But this was one that just, I had remembered the trailers barely, and that was about it. And then, Halloween night, I think it was like our first year or so being together.
Our first anniversary.
You had gotten this movie, and you're like, you've got to see this movie. It's a Stephen King movie. It's got John Cusack in it and Samuel Jackson. I'm like, okay. And it ended up being one of my favorite Stephen King films. I do think there are more adaptions that are good than bad. I even like some of the bad adaptions anyways. But yeah, if whenever Shelby's like, all right, tonight's 1408, I'm not looking at my phone, I'm not doing anything else. I'm sitting down with popcorn, snack, or dinner, because that's usually when we watch movies, is with dinner. And I am watching 1408, and it's one of those films, I probably have seen it like 8, 9, 10 times now, but every time I see it, I always find something different that creeps you out, or there's something in the background or foreground, little hints or just little things. And yeah, just as Shelby said, not going to spoil it, because this is one that not many people have seen, and this is coming from somebody that had seen a lot of movies up until that point, and it never came on my radar. So I highly recommend checking it out. But yeah, there's that one scene where it's creepy and heartfelt at the same time, and I don't know how they did it, but they did it.
It's also a testament to John Cusack as an actor, that he can pull off something that will both scare you and make you want to cry at the same time. Samuel L. Jackson does take a little bit of a backseat in this. He's basically kind of just the facilitator.
He is. He's the setup for.
But he does a really good job at it, and he's earnest in it, in that particular type of role, and it does work. Like, I don't think I could see anybody else properly pulling that off the way Jackson does.
Yeah.
And I will say that the story that the movie's based on is it's just one of the short stories, and a lot of the meat of the story for the movie is not in the actual writing. It's not in Stephen King's actual work. But what they add to it enhances what the story was trying to tell anyway. Yeah. So it's one of the few times where deviating from the original piece actually really works in its favor. And there's so many like little scares all throughout it that you will forget where some jump scares are, and they will still get you on repeat watchings.
Yeah.
Like, I always forget
Don't say anything.
the first jump scare. That's all I'm saying. It's just the first jump scare. I'm not going to say what it actually is. I always forget it's coming. So no matter how many times I've watched this movie, it always gets me.
And it's when she says jump scares, they're not like today's jump scares where it's loud noise and it's not really a real...
It's a legit scare.
It's a legit... and jumping in your face. No. It's something that actually is scary.
I think the only other movie that like has gotten me with the jump scare like that was Conjuring 2. That was the only other movie in recent memory that I can think of that legitimately the scare came out of nowhere and it creeped me out.
Yeah.
The difference between Conjuring 2 and 1408 is I will gladly watch 1408 again. Don't come at me with any of the Conjuring movies. And no, it's not happening.
All right. So the next movie is the Abominable Dr. Phoebes. Now, I do own both of these, both this and Dr. Phoebes' Revenge or Return or whatever the sequel is. I've only seen that one once. I really did just buy the box set so I could see the first one. Both, of course, starring the amazing Vincent Price as Dr. Phoebes. And this was made in the 1970s, but it definitely... it's an interesting film. It is... I would say it is kind of close to what Seven would kind of perfect, and what the killer is trying to go with here. He's not killing them based off of 7 deadly sins. I believe he's killing them based off of the plagues in Exodus.
Still biblical.
It's still biblical. But for it, I don't know if it's just because I think this was like a British movie. There is, for some odd reason, the slight sense of humor in some scenes, so that it doesn't take itself seriously in just some scenes. Like it feels like these scenes were made for a completely different movie, and so it always takes me out in some of those scenes because it's the inspectors, and it's almost like it's not like, you know, like Inspector Cousteau or Cousteau in Pink Panther, but it's kind of like that. Like there's almost aloof kind of inspector going after this serial killer, basically. But in the parts where it has the killer are all played very straightforward, menacingly, as menacingly as Vincent Price can be. But every time you go back to them finding out clues, they try to play it up for laughs. And it's a weird movie. It's a weird movie I enjoy, though. Don't get me wrong. I do thoroughly enjoy this movie. The good outweighs the bad in this type of situation here. I showed this to you last year, and I don't think you enjoyed it much.
I like Vincent Price. I don't like this movie. And I think it is because it feels disjointed a lot. Like, there's a lot of back and forth where pretty much anytime the inspectors come up on screen, it switches the entire genre. And I don't like when movies do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just a 70s thing, or if it's just a British thing, or if it's just a British 70s thing. But it's disjointed. It doesn't work. It really takes me out of it. Like, I'm there for the creepy. I'm there for like I do really enjoy movies where like you're trying to find the killer and stuff like that. But it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So by the time we get to the end of it, I don't care at all.
So the next one, this is the 1970s version of Amityville Horror, and I want to say it's probably the best version of Amityville Horror. It does star James Brolin and Margaret Kidder, who y'all would probably recognize her more as Lois Lane in Superman movies. But it is the story about the family moving into the house, the dad getting basically haunted psychologically to the point to where he wants to go about and kill the rest of his family. Because it's in the 70s, it's got that great type of synth-ish soundtrack that just kind of ups the ante in regards to creepiness vibe. That and James Rowland is just a really good actor when it comes to that type of role. And then going on to another classic, this is Alfred Hitchcock's 1963's The Birds. And it is just, I mean, I don't know if anything that not a lot of that everybody else that has talked about this movie has talked about. I know that there was some behind the scenes stuff with Alfred Hitchcock in general, with the actress.
But isn't there always?
But yeah, and Alfred just seemed like a weird guy just in general, based off the books and interviews and movies they've always done about him. That probably is the reason why he decided to do a bunch of horror movies, so that he could get away with being weird. Because I mean, if you gonna be weird in Hollywood, you might as well do the weirdest genre, which is horror, and horror can get really weird. Whereas this is probably one of his least weird ones, horror wise, which is The Birds. It's just about birds attacking the small group of people, mainly because this one lady shows up in this man's life and with the daughter. It does have some gruesome scenes, even for the 60s. Yeah, it's a great film. As I keep saying, classic film. It is one of the films where it has been referenced and
so
many things that if you've never seen it and then you go and see it now, you'll be like, oh, I have seen parts of this film because it got referenced or because it got riffed on or made fun of in movies X, Y, and Z. And yeah, this is where that came from. So your thoughts on The Birds?
I mean, I really enjoy it. It is, feels weird saying that horror movies are fun, but horror movies are fun. It's a fun movie to sit down and watch. It's a good popcorn movie. There's not really some big overarching message, really.
There's no message. There's not even really a explanation as to what happens. There's a small bit at the end where somebody on the radio kind of says that this has been happening in other places as well, and that is it.
Yeah, I mean, if they were to make this today or remake this today, they'd probably try to put some environmental message in it.
Right.
But I kind of like that there's not that kind of shoehorned in there, because yes, sometimes an environmental message in a movie works really well, and we do need to take care of it while we can. But not every nature horror movie has to have that kind of a message, and I do like this one doesn't.
Yeah.
Also, it's just some of the acting is a little over the top, and that's what makes it fun.
It is.
Especially the little girl. Sometimes her actress gets a little over the top with it, and it's fun to watch because you can tell she was kind of having fun doing that.
Right. There's some scenes, you can see them kind of
trying not to crack
there. So, speaking of fun horror movies, it's going to be interesting because it is literally about when we're recording this, it's August 17th, so it's just a couple weeks away from the sequel coming out, this is Beetlejuice, by the way, and it hasn't come out yet, so by the time this gets published, it has come out yet, so I'm sorry we just won't have our thoughts on that movie because it hasn't come out yet. But the original, of course, is great. It's probably Tim Burton's best film outside of the Batman films.
I say it's better than Batman. Don't get me wrong, I love Batman, but Beetlejuice?
I would say it's probably better than Batman, but I still prefer Batman Returns as probably his best film.
I think it's just I'm super nostalgic for Beetlejuice.
That's fair.
Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Batman movies, but my top two Tim Burton's are Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, yeah, going back to Beetlejuice, I love the puppetry in this. I love the stop motion in this. It seems like from the trailers we're going to get that again in the sequel. That's, almost 40 years later. Actually, yeah, 40 years later, because 84.
Yeah.
Wow.
40-year anniversary.
40-year anniversary. I'm sure they planned that out. Michael Keaton is great as Beetlejuice.
Michael Keaton is great in almost anything.
Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are great as the couple. It's so weird seeing Alec Baldwin in it because he is so thin. I am used to, because I didn't grow up with this film, I'm so used to seeing him stuff from like SNL and
a little more filled out.
So I'm not used to seeing him, how he was in the 80s and 90s. I'm used to everything from like 2000s going forward. So it always keeps, every time I see it, I'm like, that does not look like Alec Baldwin. Of course, we also have Winona Ryder as Lydia, who is great. It probably got a whole couple generations into the goth aesthetic or into goth girls, one of those two, or both. And then, of course, the rest of the cast is just fun to watch. And the
dinner party scene.
I'm not talking about the expressionism style that Tim Burton uses. Really is, this is like probably the top tier when it comes to German expressionism. I believe it was called, and that's really, it's those dark shadows, it's those sharp corners, it's the weird slanted everything, and that comes in fantastically here and makes the whole movie a character, basically. Makes every single set piece a character. Of course, you got the great costuming with Lydia and Beetlejuice, and even Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin have their clothing that really just, you see those clothing, and even if you didn't have their faces in them, you'd see that clothing, automatically think of their characters.
Oh, and Catherine O'Hara's costumes in this are iconic 80s.
Exactly. And it is a timeless film. It's one of those films that it's like, you put it on now and without any connotation, you could say that this came out yesterday. Except for, you've seen the actors and things after that. No, I didn't come out yesterday because, that's the mom from Stranger Things. And that's Kevin McAllister's mom. And that's Batman.
So, again, like you, I love everything about this movie, especially the costuming. So I am a stickler for, like, really cool, intricate costumings in movies. I love when that happens. I know previously we've talked about how much I love the costumings for Alice in Wonderland. Mm-hmm. I love the costuming in this even more.
Oh, yes.
Just all of it is so good. And I love that it looks like they're carrying that into the sequel, and they carried that into the stage show.
Yes.
And it's so...
The stage show is... I really wish we'd have a pro shot of that, because I would love to talk about that when we get to our musicals, but as of right now, they don't. But I have seen it in the slime videos. But it is great. It really adds a whole nother level to the Beetlejoe mythos, and the story, and adds a couple more characters in there that weren't in or like minor in the original movie. So if you like this movie, I would definitely seek out any way you can to check out the musical version.
I would absolutely love it. The sequel at least has a hint. Mm-hmm. Just like a hint, just like in the score of some of the stage show.
This is recorded August 17th. The movie has not come out yet. It will not come out for another 2 to 3 weeks from now, because it's not coming out until the first weekend in September, I believe, or the second weekend. So we haven't seen it. So we're saying this stuff before that. We haven't
Yes.
seen it.
All we've seen are trailers.
And we've only seen like the first two trailers. We haven't seen the final trailer because we don't want to get the final trailer. Always seems to spoil some stuff, so we try to always stop it with trailer. We watch the teaser trailer, and sometimes we'll watch the first full trailer, and then whatever trailer shows up on like the YouTube ads and stuff. But we never try to watch the final like 3-minute trailer that always shows up like a couple weeks before the movie comes out.
So Beetlejuice for me is one of those movies where I don't remember a moment in my life where I was unaware of it. For me, it's just always been there. It's always been around. Every fall, every channel that wasn't Disney was showing Beetlejuice, including ABC Family.
Including ABC. That's probably where I watched it, was ABC Family.
And it's such a classic. It's so good. The dinner party scene is one of my favorite scenes ever in existence. I love it.
And we won't talk about it now, but I will eventually, in one of my What Was videos, we'll talk about the animated
show.
series.
I love the show.
I would also like to see bits and pieces of that in the sequel.
Just like some
Just a
spiritual
hint.
connection.
Just
some
something
hints.
that says it's canon.
Just a little sprinkle of it in there.
Even though technically it's definitely not canon because it takes the characters in a whole different way than even the first movie did. But whatever.
But yeah, the whole movie is just so much fun. And I love that every time you get something new Beetlejuice, it just expands on it and builds on it, and everything is just perfectly encapsulated in there. Everything just works so well together. And it was the first... I think it was my first introduction to Winona Ryder, and I've enjoyed pretty much everything I've seen her in. Mm-hmm. You had to talk me into Stranger Things, but I still enjoyed it. But yeah, just two of my archetypes and role models, character-wise, growing up, were two different Winona Ryder characters, and it was Lydia and Jo Marsh. So take that what you will for how I turned out.
So speaking of German Expressionism, the next movie is probably the grandfather to all of that, and probably is one of the films, if not the film, that inspired Tim Burton, which is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It is a silent film, of course, so, and is it's technically in color, but is more seen in black and white. So this is about it's about a person who has it starts off in a mental institute, and you're being told this story through the eyes. It's considered the, what's that trope called? The something narrator.
Unreliable narrator.
The unreliable narrator. So everything that happens throughout the whole movie, you don't know, did that actually happen? Or is this because he's in the mental institute, he's just making all this up and that's what... But it's about, a circus freak show guy has this giant man, and he gets infatuated with this woman, and he has this almost Frankenstein type of creature go and kidnap her. The story is really, really simple for the most part. But what is great about it is those costumes and those set pieces, the dark shadows, the weird angles, some of these set pieces, it's like almost kind of like a optical illusion where like it looks big in the foreground, but as we walk, it's actually smaller and stuff. Is just a really, really interesting movie. It's it's over 100 years old, which is amazing that we're still talking about this movie, a century later. But and honestly, it would be very interesting. I know people are like, oh, we need to stop remaking movies. I'm like, this movie is over 100 years old. I would not mind if somebody tried to recreate it in a more, not in a modern setting, just with modern techniques. And just, it would be interesting just to see what happens. I mean, they're doing it with Nosferatu, which is around the same time, and also German Expressionism, using those same type of shadows and stuff. I mean, why not, Dr. Caligari? I have shown this to you, but I don't think you remember it, so I don't know if you even have any thoughts about it.
I have no thoughts. It made absolutely no impression on me. I don't remember anything about it. Not to say it's a bad movie, but a lot of the time frame in which he was showing me these movies, I was working consistently 14, 16-hour shifts, coming home and watching these movies and going to bed. So a lot of these I don't remember because I was too tired to pay attention.
Fair enough. Now, I know the next movie you just don't like because you don't like anthology movies. So this is Cat's Eye. I believe this one is the Stephen King-based one?
Yes.
Yep. Alright, so yes. So this is Cat's Eye. Stephen King was the writer. It's an anthology film. All the stories are just different. I think there's Stephen's horror short stories, but they're all tied together for this one story starring Drew Barrymore as this girl who gets a cat, and the mom doesn't like the cat, so the mom's always trying to get rid of the cat, but the cat is there to protect her from this troll that keeps showing up, and it's like this actual real little tiny creature troll, almost elf-sized type of thing. He's really creepy. And of course, it's being played on the myth, about the cat stealing the baby's breath, and that's why you don't want to have cats in the proximity of babies when they're real little. But it's actually, in this case, it's actually the troll that's trying to steal the baby. And the baby, she's like 5, Drew Barrymore's breath. But we've got all these just of course, they're off the wall 1980s Stephen King type of stories. There's starring people like James Woods and Alan King. It's very interesting in regards to the stories. I'm not going to go into stories. I'm just going to let you guys watch it for yourselves. But I thought it was really fun. I thought, of course, with Stephen King, there's always, for most of them, there's always like a little kind of twist to it. Not like M. Night Shyamalan type of twist, but still kind of there. And a lot of these short stories, they did kind of include that a bit. Some like it, some don't. And it's one of those movies you can take it or not kind of things. I personally enjoyed it. I know you, just because you're not a fan of anthology films, for the most part.
My issue with anthology films is I really gravitate towards like very character development heavy stories. So you can't really get a lot of that in anthology films. Anthology shows, yes. Films, not really. So you only get like such a small finite amount of time to tell the story, so you don't really get much growth. It's just like a little quick in and out, and I don't get a chance to really sit in the story and care about what's going on, so I end up not enjoying the experience. And then, Cat's Eye, it's also some of the not quite as interesting Stephen King stories, which is why they're only little shorts in an anthology and not their whole own movie. Mm-hmm. So on top of that, it's kind of mess stories to begin with, kind of thrown together to just let's see what sticks, and none of it really sticks, in my opinion.
All right, speaking of more Stephen King's Christine, the one about the car that is possessed and the guy that also eventually gets possessed because, but not really, but it's just more of infatuation and jealousy kind of thing that overtakes him, and he gets more and more reckless as the story goes on, but really he's been reckless since the beginning. I think this is a pretty interesting movie. Outside of the cars that are like the horror thing, I think this is the weaker one compared to some other movies that have that same sort of idea. It's fine. I do like the scene where Christine is all crunched up and she pulls herself back into the car. That's always really cool to see just because this is before CGI, so that is all practical effects there. Some reversing images, some it's just, things behind the scenes. But it's really cool. I don't have a lot to say on this one, but do you?
So this one's nostalgic growing up. We watched this a lot growing up, mostly because it was a tiny bit of a dig at my mom. My mom's name is Christina. My grandmother always called her Christine, and it kind of irritated her. So anytime we'd watch Christine, we'd be like, hey, look, it's Mom, as a car. And, she was in on the joke. She had fun with it. She's a huge Stephen King fan. So it was kind of one of those movies we watched a lot, so I am nostalgic for it. It's not my favorite, but for me, it's one of those, I grew up on it, so I still watch it almost every year for the nostalgia. And kind of a fun little story with it. I believe this is the movie that inspired the video for Carrie Underwood's Two Black Cadillacs. If you know the story in the song, then it kind of sort of makes sense.
A little bit.
But I think they were kind of inspired for the video through the movie Christine. So yeah, the movie itself, it is a slower one.
It really is.
But some of the deaths in it are kind of cool. And some of the people who got kind of deserved it. Not all of them, but some of them, I kind of don't feel bad.
It's definitely one of those nerd revenge stories that was happening a lot during the 80s. It's probably one of the better nerd revenge movies, just in general.
Yeah, it's kind of less
aged
creepy.
It's probably aged the best, or at least one of the better aged films for that genre, or subgenre.
Yeah, because, dude does get called out.
He does.
He's just like, this isn't right.
Yeah. So the next movie, The Craft, I've seen it. I don't have many thoughts on it. It's not a bad movie, and I mean, it of course has an actress that I've seen in other films. I just don't remember. It's just one of those. I get it confused with a couple other movies that are about that time and kind of about the same thing. That I'm just like, oh yeah, this movie. So I'm gonna let Shelby talk about that one because this is a movie she enjoys watching.
So this is a Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich movie. They're not the main characters, but they were the ones I recognized when I was little watching this. Because yes, I watched this when I was tiny. I remember watching this specifically when I was homesick from school. I don't know what it was about this movie that made me want to watch it when I was sick. But I remember watching this and Bride of Chucky a lot. The story with it is these 4 girls at I believe it's a Catholic high school, are into witchcraft and believe they're witches, and I think only one of them I think only 2 of them truly have the powers. And it is kind of a battle between good and evil by the end of it. And you do have the petty teenage girl arguments going on in there. It is fun to watch, but you do kind of cringe while you're watching it as an adult because you go, oh yeah, I kind of knew people who would have wished those kind of things on other girls. It is not a girl movie by any chance. There are some moments in there where, you do feel vindicated in how things happen. But there are also scenes where they take it too far. Specifically Nancy's character. She's really unhinged, which is the point of it. She's supposed to be unhinged. She literally ends up in an institute at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Second time that actress was in an institute in a movie.
Right. For those who don't remember, this is Fairuza Balk. She's the Dorothy in Return to Oz.
So yeah, she's great in this movie. She's truly terrifying in this movie. I remember being scared of her, and I was also terrified of snakes. And there is that scene at the end with all the the creepy crawlies, and it did kind of give me nightmares, which again, I don't know why I liked watching this when I was sick, but I loved it. It is a movie of its time. There are things in this movie that would not fly today. There's a lot of like questionable consent, as in the consent didn't exist in this movie. So I would be mindful of that if you're going into that. You have to kind of remember that movies, especially teen movies, were not really addressing the question of consent in the 80s and 90s. Sadly, so go in prepared. But otherwise, it is a fun movie.
So, as we said, we started with 10 Cloverfield Lane, so now let's get into the original Cloverfield. I remember the trailers, the build-up for this. I don't know how many of you remember this, but nobody thought this was a horror movie when the trailers first released, because there was so much mystery around it, and we had never we were not in like the heyday of giant monster movies, kind of like we are now. The last Godzilla movie that had come out in the States was way back in 1999, and that one didn't do well, so nobody was really expecting this to be a giant monster movie. We all thought, or at least a good chunk of the internet thought, that because there was a line that sounded like "it's a lion" when actually the line is "it's alive," everybody thought this was a Voltron movie, including myself. Now, eventually, there would be more stuff coming out, and we're like, oh, it is a giant monster movie. Oh, that's interesting. And this is like one of the first movies to do that shaky camera thing that every movie for almost a decade after that, it was like this, and then a year later, we got the first Paranormal Activity movie that really set in stone that for like the next decade, every other horror movie was going to be shaky camera. Some people liked it, some people didn't. I, at the time, did not mind it. I thought it was cool. Looking back, though, man, do some of those scenes give me a headache. But going back to this movie, it is a very interesting way that they tell the story, because it's all through this video camera, and the way they do flashbacks is the guy accidentally remembers that he's like recording over the day before with his girlfriend. It's got an interesting cast before they really kind of blew up.
With the exception of one.
It's just, I haven't seen all these people and you're like, wait a second. Y'all all would be pretty much in every other movie for the next decade or so after this film would come out. But this was like the one that really started. And the creature is a very interesting designed creature for its time. By now, I am kind of over the tall, skinny looking, gray/black beady-eyed monster. Again, at the time that this movie came out, it was a very unique design. But now, every other monster alien movie, they kind of are borrowing from that design still. And I'm done and sick and tired of it. So I'll watch this movie every once in a while, but honestly, I'll just watch 10 Cloverfield Lane. If you want a time capsule movie, definitely check this out, because they show parts of New York and the cell phones and the monitors and ads and stuff, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's right. That was the thing in the time period where this movie came out. So that's, in some of the conversations they have are that is what people were talking about during the period of this time. Other than that, it's by rewatching it, it's kind of just, it's okay. I'm not going to say it's a bad movie, but I'm not saying it's a great movie. It's just okay. Your thoughts?
I'll say it's a bad movie. It's a bad, shaky cam, found footage movie that created more bad found footage movies, and I hate it. I love 10 Cloverfield Lane. I hate Cloverfield because it gives me a headache. I'm so sick and tired of the found footage motif. I'm tired of that same tired design for the creature, because by the time I saw it, I'd already seen it 5 million times everywhere else. Also, what really, really took me out of this found footage movie was they're trying to make it seem like all of these kids were like unknowns. They hadn't been in anything. Mean Girls had already come out. Lizzie Kaplan is in this movie.
Alright, fair enough.
Janice Ian is in this movie, and they're trying to act like, oh, she's never really been in anything. Everyone in this movie's almost anonymous. It's Janice Ian. I keep wanting to make Mean Girls jokes while I'm watching this movie, because it's irritating me so much that they're trying to act like Lizzie Kaplan hasn't been in anything.
Honestly, I did not recognize that was the girl from Mean Girls.
It just, oh man, it irritated me so much, because that's another big peeve I have with what's supposed to be like these found footage movies where they're trying to make it seem like nobody in this has been seen in anything else, is when they do get someone who's been in at least one big project, and we can't argue Mean Girls wasn't a big project. Mean Girls was huge when it came out, and Janice Ian was a fan favorite. And then they cast someone who played that big of a role in that big of a film in what's supposed to be this little found footage movie.
Yeah, true.
It really takes you out of it. And that just immediately made me hate the movie, because now I'm distracted the whole time.
Fair
On
enough.
top of it giving me a headache because of all the shaky cam.
Now for a movie that aged much better and is still considered a classic by today's standards is Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake. I'm gonna say it. I actually prefer this movie over the original.
Me too.
It's just I mean I get it. The original George Romero movie is a classic. I like the zombie makeup better in this one. That's just, and the stuff, the characters that like the just the tropes that they put for these characters are just much more interesting than the original, because it is the 2000s, so they can kind of do some more stuff that I don't think they did in the 80s or 70s film. It's been forever since I've seen that film. The one weird thing though is like seeing Ty Burrell play
Yeah.
just basically a bad guy, when I had seen this film, but every time I watch it I'm just like, that's right, Phil is in this movie. Why is Phil in this movie as a bad guy? Wow, that's really interesting, because everything after he's playing this just a sweet or almost sweet aloof guy, and where in this one he's not, and I'm just like, this is really against character here, Phil.
And kind of similar note, but not kind of offshooting off of that, Mekhi Phifer. I saw him in 8 Mile and then watched this. So I'm sitting there going, where's Eminem? Where's your buddy? So yeah, like, it's not as jarring as Ty Burrell, but I keep, like, every time Mekhi Phifer came on screen, the back of my head just started playing Lose Yourself.
I will say, for zombie movies, this probably has one of the best openings
Yes.
of how everything is going down. Yes, and we will get to it. Actually, I think we already did with Zombieland.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting opening. But this is like almost Patient Zero level, just showing you how everything just breaks down so suddenly. And everybody, looking back now, you're like, yeah, that's unfortunately probably how it would all go down.
I mean, if the past 4 years have taught us anything, it's that if, on the very, very off chances, and it's not actually really that feasible, a zombie thing were to happen, yeah, we'd all be gone. We'd all be gone, because there'd be people who would not do what they're supposed to and hurt everybody else.
Yeah. But, so this is just a great, opening. It's a great movie from beginning to end.
It really is.
The only thing outside of Ty Burrell being in that kind of is weird for me is the movie takes like a really sad turn at the end. I'm just like, oh, but it's I guess it is what it is on that. I do believe this would get sequels, not like the original did. Like the original got so many sequels to it. I don't know if this one ever got any sequels that are directly tied to this one that weren't just its own thing. Your thoughts on? I mean, you've kind of
yeah, we've kind of been talking back and forth. I do really enjoy this one. When it comes to zombie movies, it's really just this and Zombieland for me. Everything else just kind of doesn't live up. Zombieland's just fun. This is fun, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Like this one, I wouldn't suggest eating dinner while you watch it,
No.
but definitely snack.
Yeah.
If you're squeamish, maybe skip this one.
Yeah.
Like if you can't handle a slasher movie, don't watch this because it's worse than a slasher movie.
Yeah, it's got some scenes that will make you
There's
not want to hold down your lunch.
there's a couple scenes in this one that I wouldn't say they're upsetting, but they're
gross.
really gross.
They are gross.
It's definitely a gross out horror movie.
Yep.
Which those are really fun, but be careful.
Yeah.
If you are gonna like eat a full meal while you're watching it, maybe keep a trash can nearby.
Yep.
But yeah, it's fun. Have fun with it. Or do what I did one year when I decided to watch it and make everybody spaghetti and then serve it and say, here you go. And watch people's face turn green.
I'm sorry. I've been looking at the screen the whole time because I know the next movie I can't freaking wait to talk about.
I know.
It's The Descent.
Excited.
It's 2005's The Descent. This is one of the coolest, creepiest horror movies.
And can we just talk about the poster for a minute? Because the
poster
poster
is
alone.
awesome. Like, you're going to see it because I always use just the posters when we're talking about it. Look at the thing. It is the characters, or supposed to be the characters. It is the 5 women that go. I want to say it's rock climbing. It's not rock climbing. It's cave diving, I guess. They're going to exploring caves. So it's 4 of these women, and they're all in the shape of a skull.
It's so cool.
It is so creepy, but it really shows you right there and then this is going to be that type of film where you're going to see it once and see one thing, and you're going to see it a second time or a fourth time and see something totally different. So, as I said, it's about 5 women that go cave diving. They're all kind of from different aspects of life, and it's mainly about like this one woman that like is on like I forgot, but I think she had like even recently had to deal with death of a loved one, I think, or divorce.
Her daughter.
Yeah, or something. So she already has trauma going into it, and they're all just like, we all used to hang out. We haven't hung out in a while. Let's do the thing that we always used to like to do, and let's go cave diving. So it's just 4 girls going, 4 women.
I thought it was 6.
Well, I'm sorry, 6. Eventually it's 5.
They dwindle down.
They dwindle down. And they go to this undiscovered cave that's not on the maps. And okay, so the first time you're watching it, it's a slow burn because for most of it, it's them going deeper into the cave. It's them making sure they're rationing out their items. It's kind of hinting at they shouldn't be there, but they never see why. And then, boom, about 2/3 into the film, oh my goodness,
Cave people.
cave people. However, in the second or third time I was watching it, you see the cave people have been there from the freaking beginning of the cave. You can go on YouTube and see those little videos where they'll point out, but yeah, throughout the whole time they're in the cave, they're in the background, they're in the shadows, they're the little slight camera movements, blink and you'll miss it scenes. So the whole time you feel like you're being watched because you are, and it's so cool. And I watched this in college, and then like a couple years ago I showed you it.
Yeah.
And I had been hyping it up, and I'm like, sometimes I'll hype up a movie and it will just not click. with you, but this one clicked.
This one, okay, I love it, but it terrifies me. This is a middle of the day, all lights in the house on, don't give me anything to eat because I will choke on it kind of movie. I love how much this movie terrifies me. It is such a claustrophobic movie. And usually I'm not a fan of slow burns, but because the tension is built up so tight the whole way through, it doesn't feel as slow burn as it is. And by the time you get to the end of it, it feels like you just started the movie. It goes by so fast because of how much they build the tension and how much is going on, even though it is a slow burn. And that ending. Oh, I'm not going to spoil it because if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. This movie literally terrified me. I'm so glad you showed it to me on a day where I had 2 consecutive days off because I needed the whole other day to recover from this movie. It was so much. Oh.
I think what also helped is because you always talk about you like movies where there's character building.
There's so much character building in this.
There's so much, just like every line of dialogue, you get to know more and more about all these women. So by the time they're starting to be clicked off one by one, you actually kind of feel bad.
Yeah.
So you're like, dang it. And you're hoping that they survive just one more, because they're just like
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Just around the corner. It's going to be the exit kind of thing.
And man, second and third viewings of this movie is when you'll finally be able to actually eat while watching it, because it is gruesome, and the big moments that happen will, if you're eating while you're watching it, you're going to choke on your food the first time you watch it. So the more times you watch it, the more comfortable you can get while watching it, and the more you'll kind of do that cliche thing where you at home are watching it and you're yelling at the screen. But it's so much fun. It's so creepy though. Like, if you have kids in the house, they need to be at like grandma's house before you can watch this movie, because they'll hear you reacting to it and want to come in there, and it will scar them. Do not watch this with kids in the house.
Mm-hmm. So the next movie, I don't really have thoughts on this, is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It is a story about a woman or a college teen who, through being told by her priest, should stop taking
an psychotic med,
and thus she thinks she gets possessed, and half the movie is about her possession and the creepy things that she sees, but then the other half is like a courtroom procedure movie, because they're putting the priest on trial because of, they're blaming him for her eventual death. I just don't get into courtroom drama type of stuff, and I don't really get into exorcist type of films for the most part. So this is all on Shelby.
So I watched this one a lot growing up. It is one of those movies where the creepy moments have like really stuck with me and like really creeped me out. One thing that does take me a little out of it is the girl playing Emily Rose is also in White Chicks. She is the girl.
That's right.
Yes. She's the girl who, while she's trying on clothes, grabs her stomach and starts talking about Tina the Talking Tummy.
That's right, it is.
So that does take me out of it a little, but I watched it so much growing up, and I was so creeped out by it growing up, that some of those scenes really did stick with me. And I do enjoy court procedural movies, TV shows. I do enjoy those kind of things. So, and they play the priest off as sympathetic. They do play him off as a sympathetic kind of villain. Because he really does truly believe that she was possessed. And the family and she really did believe that she was possessed. And this movie was inspired by like an actual case, I believe, in Europe. So they had that to pull from. I will say, a lot of people compare this to The Devil Inside. This is better than The Devil Inside. Like, The Devil Inside is really bad. It's not good at all. This one, it is more character driven. There is more going on with it. Laura Linney is great in this as the defense attorney. They do a good job comparing the two because when they're telling the story, when the scares happen, basically all in flashback, because it's being told as people are taking the stand to tell what they think was happening. And there is a moment, and I'm gonna tell a story from one of the times I watched it. It was my birthday. I had friends staying over. It was 4 teenage girls on this broken down full size bed, so it already was taking on more weight than it should have been taking. And a scare happened, and one of the girls screamed, and then it set off a domino effect, just like one after the other. We all started screaming, mostly because one girl started when she got creeped out. And my mom actually came in and made us turn the movie off because, we were waking up everyone because we started that movie at 12 p.m. Well, 12 a.m., sorry. So we were waking the house up screaming at this movie. I will say it is one that it's more fun to watch with people who have never seen it before. And if they're, easily scared, it is more fun to watch it then because of that domino effect. Everyone reacting to it together is more fun with it. There are some, heartfelt scenes in it as well, especially the sicker she gets. She has this semi moment of clarity where she kind of dreams she's meeting with the Virgin Mary, and telling her, this was always gonna be your fate. Your death is gonna show people that the supernatural's real, kind of thing. And that's when the character kind of accepts her fate, and then it's all downhill from there. You can tell that her particular soul has given up, so her body's getting ready to give up. So the possession fully goes into effect at that point.
Mm-hmm. All right, so next is the classic Evil Dead. This is the original one by Sam Raimi, and it's a classic movie. I do prefer the sequels, and I actually even prefer the remake from the 2010s. But this one's fine. This is before Bruce Campbell's Ash, or Ashley, as he's called out in most of this film, becomes the Ash that we know from all the other Evil Dead movies.
Yeah.
He's kind of a wimp in this one. He barely talks until the last bit of the movie.
But he has to go through everything he goes through in here to get to the Ash we know.
True, but it's just kind of funny because Evil Dead 2 is technically a remake of this in the Sam Raimi style that more people are used to, and he starts off being that kind of he doesn't even have any of the catchphrases that we would know. Boomstick, that's not in here. The chainsaw hand, that's not in here. None of the stuff that people think about when they say Evil Dead happened in this film. This is the original. This is Sam Raimi's, I think, first theatrical film. So he was still trying to find his style here.
This is the one with the tree scene, though.
Both Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 both have the tree scene in it.
But it's more unsettling here.
It's more unsettling. And the effects are, of course, because this is technically, I think, an indie film, they're a lot more on the cheaper side. Even the makeup and stuff is very much on the cheaper side. It's the last 10 minutes where it finally, kind of gets Sam Raimi is kind of getting into his thing there, and we get some of the effects that we eventually would just know Sam Raimi to often do. So, it's one of those for nostalgia things. It's one of those, if you're trying to get into indie horror, this is one to definitely search and check out. Your thoughts on it?
Overall, as a whole, it's a good movie. The tree scene is a really, really rough watch. Most of the time, given the option, I will skip that scene. I can't watch it. I will hide away from it.
Fair enough.
It's too disturbing.
Fair enough.
It's definitely something that would not fly
No.
today
No.
because it's definitely one of those.
It's a weird scene.
It's not just a weird scene; it's a straight up triggering scene.
Fair
like
enough.
it's not just. I mean, it's difficult to just regular watchers, but to people who might have a history in certain traumas, it's nightmare inducing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Final Destination 3. Okay, I'm going to say this right now. I don't like the Final Destination movies. Never have, never will. I've seen a couple of them. I've seen this one. I've even seen one in theaters. I'm good. I don't care for them. I feel like they're kind of like one step below snuff films for me. I know they're not, but that's the way I feel about them. So Shelby loves them though. So take it away, Shelby.
I only love the first three. Anything past the first three is not worth watching. I particularly love the third one because it's silly for a lot of it. A lot of the stuff that goes on is just really silly. The first one, it's more like practical, kind of believable, could happen kind of things. The second one straight up traumatized me. But this one was more fun to watch, I guess you would say. And this is the other Mary Elizabeth Winstead horror movie that we have. Because
we have 3 of them.
She is... Oh, what's the third one?
You'll see.
Okay. But this was the other one I was talking about. She is our final girl, basically, in this movie. Until you get to the very, very end, and then if you've seen it, if you know, you know. Yeah. I watched this so much in middle and high school. This was one of our like go-to horror movies for a girls' night, mostly because we all thought Ryan Merriman was cute. So like it was fun to watch. Some of the scenes are really, really gruesome though, so if you're squeamish, be mindful. But yeah, there's not really much to say about the Final Destination movies. You know, you have the classic scene at the beginning where a group of the people avoid death, so now death is out to get them. I do still want to get the first 2 because I grew up on all 3 of the first 3.
I'm not watching them.
Okay. If you're millennial, maybe early Gen Z, and going forward, you'll get the trauma of the second one. But yeah, this one's fun. It's got one line that just kind of always stuck with me was one of the guys who ends up dying towards the end is making fun of one of the girls for being upset about a roller coaster, which if you haven't seen this one, the whole thing with this one is it starts with a roller coaster disaster. And his line going in there is like, you're more likely to die going to a roller coaster than on one. Which, you know, that just sets everything up. You know from that moment on, if you haven't even seen the trailer or the poster, that's what's going to happen. They're not smart movies. They're just fun.
All right, so next is John Carpenter's The Fog. Probably, I feel like one of his lesser-known films. And it is a very slow burn. It's about this small portside town. And it's just one night, fog starts rolling in. And creepy things happen. And eventually, water zombie creatures show up and kill a few people. And then they go away. It's a pretty simple story. Not much else happens. It does have Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and Janet Leigh. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about the film, and I know you haven't seen it.
I haven't.
So we'll move on to a much more interesting film, in my opinion, From Dusk Till Dawn by Robert Rodriguez, starring George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. I think by now most people have seen this to where you're not going to get spoiled to know that halfway through this film it becomes a totally different film.
Yeah.
So the first half, of course, is about this family getting kidnapped by George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, known as the Gecko Brothers. I forget why they're kidnapping these people, but eventually, I think it's to get some money or something. Anyways, so they come to this bar that's called From Dusk Till Dawn, And as the sun sets, everybody in there, that's not the people that just arrive, are vampires. And then it becomes a whole shootout of and trying to survive until dawn. The vampires, and there's blood galore. There's creature effects galore. It's got a great cast, including Selma Hayek and Danny Trejo, and Cheech and Tom Savini, and just overall pretty cool film. Your thoughts on it?
It's just fun from start to finish, really. I'm not usually a fan of anything with Tarantino, and I'm also not usually a George Clooney fan, but this was fun. I enjoyed it. It is kind of a, like, turn your brain off and just enjoy kind of film. There's no, like, real deeper thing going on. Just have fun with it. Enjoy the gore. Enjoy the effects. Just relax. Have fun.
Mm-hmm. And, alright, so this next film is technically more, I guess, a Christmas film, in my opinion. It's Gremlins, but it's in the horror section because it's a horror movie first. It just happens to take place during Christmas time.
Yep.
And it is a classic film about this dad trying to get his son a last-minute Christmas gift, and basically, technically steals, I mean, he does pay some money for it, but, I mean, the main guy does decline the money, but he gets the kid sells it to him eventually, so he gets Gizmo, or the Mogwai that eventually gets called Gizmo. Of course, you got the 3 rules: don't feed it after midnight, don't get it near water, and of course don't expose it to sunlight. And what happens when he feeds it after midnight? He exposes to water, and of course the main issue is exposes to sunlight. And, of course, hijinks ensues, and we get the Gremlins out of that, and it becomes almost Looney Tunes-esque in regards to creepy creatures, but the way that they're doing everything is kind of Tex Avery, Chuck Jones type of hijinks. And it's a fun film, great creature effects. This is by Joe Dante, who later on would do Small Soldiers. And this is just a favorite classic 80s film. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I enjoy this one. It is a lot of fun. It gets referenced in everything. Everything at some point will reference Gremlins.
Especially the rules.
Yes, especially the rules. I was watching an episode of, like, Fresh Prince yesterday, and they reference one of the rules. I think it's because Aunt Viv was pregnant, and they said, "Oh, well, you've already fed her after midnight," type of thing. So, like, they get referenced all over the place. It's a lot of fun. This one, and only this one, is a lot of fun. I will watch this one right on that cusp from Halloween to Christmas pretty much every year. I think we usually watch this, like, right
towards
there.
the end of October going into November.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what she's talking about is Gremlins 2, The New Batch, which is more of a comedy film than a horror film, but because it's a sequel, it's going to be in the same spot. And whereas this one, the Mogwai Gizmo gets hit by water, and then of course that creates more Mogwais, and so they're evil, and they know not to feed themselves after midnight, but they do, and so they turn into Gremlins, and they go around terrorizing people. This one is played more for laughs. It is very meta. Like, this plays some jokes that even by today's standards would still get some laughs. I'm talking Deadpool level meta here with some of these jokes.
It wishes it was Deadpool level. Where Deadpool pulls it off, this does not.
We're going to agree to disagree on that. And if you've seen the Key and Peele sketch about all the different type of Gremlins, yes, they are in there, and Joe Dante did say at one point, yes, that is kind of how the creation of Gremlins 2 happened. Because Gremlins 1 was such a box office success, they brought everybody back for the sequel. And yeah, it is bonkers. It's got references to Batman, to freaking Hulk Hogan's in at one point. And of course they sing New York, New York. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. If you want to literally just watch like a good parody of the Gremlins, watch Gremlins 2, because they even make fun of Phoebe Cates' little talk that she had in the first one. They try to do it again, and they just Zach Galligan's character just shuts her down. Like nobody wants to hear about that. It is hilarious. I do have to mention, because otherwise people will talk in the comments. Howie Mandel is the voice of Gizmo, if you don't know. So yes, he in the 80s he was a stand-up comedian, and he did voice acting. So he's Bobby's World, and then now I think more people probably know him as America's Got Talent. But people in the 80s and 90s, we know him mostly as Gizmo.
This next one's going to be all on Ben because I haven't seen it, because it is a foreign language film, and my eyes won't focus if I'm having to watch a movie and read the dialogue. My eyes
She's
won't
one of
do
those
that.
people that doesn't like subtitled movies.
It gives me a headache. I honestly can't focus on the two things at once.
So this is by Bong Joon-ho. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's done, of course, he's known for a lot more films nowadays. This was the first film I saw him in. It's a very interesting horror film about, I think what it happens at the beginning, from what I recall, is just a bunch of waste matter gets flushed down. And of course, a couple of years later, that causes one of the sea creatures in the water to become this giant monster, and he goes and terrorizes the town. But because it's Bong Joon-ho, there's a whole another level of the story going on, about polluting waters and stuff like that. It's a great film. The creature is such an interesting look to him, because you can see the parts where it was once like a fish or whatever, but it is so mutated that it's just become this otherworldly, almost Lovecraftian creature look by the time that it's terrorizing everybody. And it's just a fantastic film. If you like his later movies, I'd definitely recommend and check out this one. This next one, I'm gonna let Shelly lead, because this was one of her films.
So the next one is another John Cusack movie. It's Identity. I watched this a lot growing up. My mom was a huge John Cusack fan, so we watched a lot of John Cusack movies. This one in particular, we watched a good bit. I don't know particularly why, but we did. It's nostalgic for me. It's got some interesting moments in it. There are things in this movie that would not fly today, though. Like, the main framing of the story would not fly today. That's not how the particular...
We're trying not to spoil it, because it's a real big...
We are.
Real
it's
big plot.
It's a huge plot and huge plot point in it, and it is the twist of the movie.
Yeah.
Which, if you're paying attention, you'll figure that twist out in like 20 minutes.
I didn't, but okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of like big names in this. Like, it's got John Cusack, Ray Liotta, Amanda Peet, Alfred Molina. It's I'm trying to think of how to properly say this without giving the entire movie away.
At first it's a slasher horror, but then it turns into a psychological horror,
Yeah,
basically.
it tries to meld the two together.
It doesn't do that well, I think.
I think it would have been better if they didn't try to put that twist in there.
I think it would have been better if the whole movie was flipped and we start with the ending and then we show why he's there.
Yeah, that definitely would have been better.
Because then the audience knows going in about everything. and can
Try and figure out who's who and what's going to happen.
exactly.
There are definitely things I could have done better in it. I think I'm forgetting some of the cast. I just can't remember who all was in it. Even with IMDb up, there's so many people in. It's such a big cast. There's so many people in it.
Yeah.
That unless you're going specifically to the entire cast list, you're not going to be able to see. It's fun if you kind of take the time it was made into account. It's a 2003 movie. We didn't really take a lot of specific issues into consideration when writing characters, and it needed a more understanding touch to it.
Yeah. And I'm gonna agree with all that, and then some. It is a movie of its time, and it definitely has an interesting cast. It tries to do something different that not many people or not many movies did about this type of I'll say is psychological issue. That's as far as I'm going to say, and it doesn't do it well, and it definitely doesn't live up to the standards of what we know about all that goes into it. John Cusack does a good job. But I don't remember anybody else in the cast, even though I'm looking at their faces right now. I have seen this movie a couple times, and it's one of those movies I'll see it. I kind of enjoy it, but at the same time, I'm just like, there's other movies I'd rather watch. Speaking of which other movies I'd rather watch, The Lost Boys, which is the classic 80s movie about the Corey, one of the Coreys meeting the other Corey. And he moves to this beachside town. His brother gets in with the wrong gang, and what do you know it? The gang is vampires, and they're actual vampires. And so then the rest of the movie is the younger Coreys trying to defeat the vampires without their brother succumbing to being an actual vampire. It's got a cool cast. It's the 80s, so it's got a very cool style motif to it. I have seen the sequels, and even though some of the cast does show up in the sequels, they just don't live up to the original. There's just something about the original that just makes it a really fun movie there. And your thoughts?
I honestly think it's the writing for the original that just makes it more fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's got, even though it's a vampire movie, it's got like more authenticity to it than like the sequels do. The acting is really good in this one. It's kind of one of those like Halloween teen classics.
Yeah.
Side note, this was one of the first movies that I watched after starting Gilmore Girls, and it was really weird watching this movie for the first time and seeing Richard Gilmore.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That was one of the few things that kind of took me out of it, because, I was used to seeing Ed Herman as Richard Gilmore, and seeing him in this movie is kind of a difference. It's also when I first started realizing that, actors don't just do one role. So, yeah, it's definitely just like one of those like really fun movies. You can watch it around spooky season, or you can watch it in the middle of summer and you'll still have fun with it.
Yeah, this is definitely not specifically for October type of movie. It does take place during the summertime, so you can watch it, anytime during the year and still have fun with it. I mean, that's with pretty much any movie, basically.
Yeah, but when you're looking at horror movies, you typically lean towards the cooler fall months.
But this could be seen as like, depending on where you live, as like early as like April or May.
Yeah.
All right. Next is Misery, which I'm going to say right now I did not see, and I did not grow up with Misery. I know it's like one of the big classic Stephen King movies. I've known of it. I knew of all the famous scenes and the tropes that go into this, because they were referenced in so many movies afterwards. But I had never seen the film until just about 5 or so years ago, and it definitely holds up very well. I mean, it's Kathy Bates. You can't go wrong with Kathy Bates. She's amazing in everything she's been in. James Caan, rest in peace, is amazing as well. It is kind of weird seeing him in this because the first thing I saw him in was Elf.
Yeah.
So it's just, but it's kind of funny because he's a writer in this and he's the book publisher in Elf. So I'm just like, could you make a connection that they're kind of there? And that's kind of why he doesn't like Elf, is because it's in the snow, and in an earlier life he got kidnapped in the snow. But whatever. But it's a fun, kidnapping movie and a kidnapper trying to escape movie. And because I had never seen it, I did not see half the things that were going to happen in the movie come, because only some of the big things get referenced in the films. The entire film doesn't get referenced. So I had no clue what was going to happen by the end of it. And it was a really cool, fun movie.
It's also a good look at, like, fandom toxicity.
It is, yes.
Something that's not really kind of more talked about now.
Yeah.
Especially with, like, certain fandoms.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of, like, my blueprint of how not to be. As you get older, you hit your teen years and your adult years, and you really start to get passionate about certain projects,
Certain people, or actors, or writers.
This is a good look at what not to do. Don't get this fanatic about it, and not just obviously don't kidnap a person. Don't let whatever fandom you're in become your entire personality.
I agree.
It's a good warning in that sense, and
don't let a franchise become your entire thing, to where if something happens in the character developments of one of the books, movies, comics, video games, what have you, that it pisses you off to where you are hating on that for the entire rest of your life, because at the end of the day, it's just a form of media.
It's kind of it's a good blueprint on what not to do and how not to be when it comes to things you're passionate about.
How not to be a fan.
Exactly. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily love everything about something you're a fan of.
Right.
Because there are things that I absolutely adore, that there are big plot points that I can't stand and I choose to believe they didn't happen.
Same here. There's stuff in certain things that I enjoy that I'm just like, yeah, I like everything but this one thing.
Yeah.
And maybe even everything after too. But, that happens.
So yeah, but it is also a fun watch, and it is definitely a cold months movie. This would not feel like the right vibe to watch when it's like sunny and 90 degrees outside.
No.
This is it's cold
Middle
out.
of
You've got
winter.
dead of winter. You've got your coffee. You've got your hot cocoa. This is also one of those you could definitely snack while eating it. Because there's not really that many gruesome moments in it.
Yeah.
It's definitely more psychological horror than anything else.
Oh, yes. All right. And next we've got Pet Sematary, which was another Stephen King film I hadn't seen until years later. It is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it is very interesting. I like the idea. That there's this basically cursed graveyard, pet graveyard, where you put your dead pets in this graveyard and the animal will come back, but the animal comes back evil because it's like an evil spirit thing, just like everything else is in Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that idea. I also like the idea of, kid passed away and the kid passed away too soon, so he wants to put him in said graveyard, but because, evil spirit, that's not going to come back the same way. I don't think it should have been that little of a kid.
No.
I honestly think the movie would be so much more interesting if it was like literally any other age range of a kid, from like middle school up, because then you can do so much more with that type of character, because there's only so much the little kid still murders somebody in it, but it's like by that point you're just kind of almost laughing at it because the kid is dubbed and the makeup looks weird, and I haven't seen the remake. I heard it was really bad, so I'm not going to check it out. But I'm feeling like, man, if this was like, yeah, I mean, it could still happen the same way. Somebody runs out in front of the road, accidentally gets hit by a semi. Still, earlier in their life. I mean, like, this was almost like a Frankenstein type of movie, but like, it just, if Frankenstein was a toddler, basically, and that's where it always, like, just leaves me wanting more. It's like, I really want this to have been, something built off of it, where it's like, it's a middle school, or it's a teen that's possessed, but because it's the way they're possessed, they're not human anymore. They're kind of, monster-ish, and build off of that. And they kind of try to do that at the very end with the wife, but it's over and done with so quickly that you just are like, wait, that's where we probably should have started, kind of thing, is with the wife, or with they have, I think, with the other kid, or heck, with Herman Munster. He something like that. Just, I don't know. That's the only. It's a good idea. It's just not that good of a movie. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
I would say this is the most mockable Stephen King movie.
Yes, it is.
It's the most mockable. It's the least creepy, honestly, because, again, like, the makeup and everything is just so goofy.
Even for that, I can't even say, because it was in the 80s. I'm like,
no, even for then, like, in the 80s, you can do some truly terrifying things, but they didn't, because I think
you don't want to do it on a kid.
You don't want to do it on a kid.
And they hadn't gotten to the point, I think, where makeup was, you could put that safely on a kid in the amount that they wanted to. I mean, and that's...
That, and, like, kids will pick at it.
Yes.
And I think they wanted to do
kid,
something...
I think he's only, like, 2... the actual actor, I think he's only like maybe 2 or 3 in real life, so I don't even think he would have known what was really going on. So,
and it's just, I'm always wary about horror movies centered around like little kids.
Yeah.
But it's done in such a silly way. Like, it's trying to take itself seriously.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't come off that way. So it's more of, I like to laugh at this movie. It's the reason we have it type of deal. And we got it at, like, Goodwill.
I honestly think this is like one of those things where it's just like the Simpsons could have done it better.
Honestly, yes. Like, Maggie as
Maggie as the kid, and, Santa's little helper, or Snowball 2, or whatever number they're on for Snowball. That all, and then of course at the end Marge, but of course because it's Homer, that would have been that. And see, that's how you make them.
Come on, next Treehouse of Horrors episode right there.
Right, or you do the movie, but make it a dark comedy type of thing.
Yeah,
that's what this movie needs to be. It needs to be a dark comedy for it to be good.
Yeah, because otherwise it's
straight.
just fun to make fun of.
Right. All right. So next is Psycho, and I'm gonna come out here and say it right now. I hadn't seen this movie until 2020 when our local theater was playing it because they didn't have any new movies showing. So they're just like, why not show Psycho? And I'm just like, well, I've never seen that film. And Shelby was like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's one of the few Alfred Hitchcock movies I just have never seen. And it's over 50, 60, 70 years old by now. So I think we can all know that first half of the movie, you're following this one lady, she gets killed, and the rest of it is like a murder mystery kind of thing, but you know who the murderer is, you just don't know how they're going to figure it out. And of course there's another twist at the end, and it's very interesting, and the acting is great, and it's got Janet Leigh in it, and I don't have anything to say that everybody else has already said about this movie. I don't know if it will be... it's definitely not my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, even for horror movies wise. I think that would have to go to The Birds. But it is a good movie. your thoughts?
This is my favorite Hitchcock movie.
Ah.
Period. End of discussion. I love this one, which is why I was so shocked when 2020 rolls around and our theater was doing their retro rewinds just so they could have people coming in. The entire time they're doing these rewinds, they're revamping the entire theater too. So like the entire lobby is under construction. So we go in to watch this movie. We hadn't been there in a while because, 2020. So we get in there, everything's under construction. We have to order our tickets at the concession stand, and then we go in and sit down to watch this movie. And I'm just enjoying every second of it. And he's sitting there looking at the screen like, oh, so this is what I'd never seen. This is what everyone was talking about. And it's one of those few movies that everyone talks about that actually lives up to the hype.
I do, yes.
It's not like a situation with like Fight Club where everyone talks about it and then you watch it and you're let down. This one legitimately is good, like all the way through. It's legitimately a good movie. To me, this is like the horror movie of all horror movies. Everything references it. There's so much fun within it. I really enjoy the development for Norman all the way through. Just like slowly getting bits and bits and bits of more of his psyche, and then by the time you get to the end of the movie and you have that just close up on his face, it's so satisfying.
So the next is it's a newer-ish classic film, The Raven, 2012, and starring John Cusack. I had seen this back in college because it was, I believe, a movie one of me and my friends rented at a Redbox. And we watched it just because we were like, hey, we've heard this is good. And it blew me away of how really fun this was. And then later on, while we have been married by now, Shelby's talking about she loves John Cusack from films. And I'm like, oh, have you seen The Raven? And she's like, no, what is that one? I'm like, well, it's about a movie that takes place during the time of Edgar Allan Poe. John Cusack plays Edgar Allan Poe, and somebody is murdering people based on his stories. So the police hire Edgar Allan Poe to find out who the murderer is. And that's what sold her to her, and that is exactly what the movie is. It is great. It got some really cool kills, all based off of the classic Edgar Allan Poe films, like The Pit and the Pendulum and The Cast of Amontillado, all like that. And, of course, we got John Cusack being perfect casting for Edgar Allan Poe. And, yeah, it has now become a staple we see every October because I enjoyed it, and I'll let Shelby say how much she enjoys it.
I love everything about this movie. It's so good. So, for a little bit of a, not really a reference, but a recommendation, if you enjoyed Netflix's Fall the House of Usher, go watch this movie. It's definitely got the same feel, same vibe, but it's in the correct time period. John Cusack in this movie is just great throughout. Everyone else is great as well. But just it being the correct period to time frame to show it in. Before you even finish the description of it, while describing it to me, I'm only going sold. Because as soon as you said John Cusack is Edgar Allan Poe in this movie, I went, don't need to know anything else. Sold. Let's watch it. Let's go. And then I actually sat down and watched it, and I am glued to the screen the entire time. I put off going to the bathroom because I didn't want to stop watching the movie because it's so much fun. I really enjoy like those it's kind of similar to how Seven goes, where it's different. It's like the same guy. It's a serial killer, but it's technically a different case each time because it's a different victim each time. So it's interesting trying to piece all that together, trying to figure out who's doing what, and by the time you get to the end of it and you know the whole story of what's going on, you go back and rewatch it, you start piecing together how it all fit, and you're just like, oh, that was so good. That all just worked so well together. And as you've seen through our other videos, and now with 3 separate movies in this one, I am just a John Cusack stan.
All right, so now an even more recent film, 2023's Renfield. So we have been wanting to see this film in theaters, and then it just came out and we were busy, so we didn't get to check it out in theaters. But we did eventually. We just bought the DVD when it came out because we like Nicholas Hoult. We like Nicolas Cage. We're like, it's got to be good if it's got those 2 people in it, and it absolutely is. It is all based off of Nicholas Hoult's character being Renfield, being the person that helps Dracula, played by Nicolas Cage, get the people to his castle, to his dungeon, so that he can drain his blood. But then Nicholas realizes, this is a toxic relationship that I want to get out of. So he goes to therapy and he becomes a better person. And he meets up with Awkwafina's character. And at the same time, Awkwafina is a cop who's trying to fight off Ben Schwartz's character and their family. And both sides just come together in a clash at the end. That's just great fun to watch. It is very gory. It is lots of blood, lots of gore. So if you're squeamish, maybe not check this one out. I do have, it is kind of fun watching this because I am friends with one of the actresses that's in there. So anytime I see her in a film, Jenna Kendall, so anytime I see Jenna in a film, I always got to shout out to her and be like, hey, I saw you in your new movie, you were great. So it was cool just seeing her in this. But it's a fantastic film throughout, and I highly recommend checking it out. And I know you have the same thoughts.
I do. I love everything about this movie. I was already sold just from the cast alone. And can I just say, I love this kind of like fun vampire movie renaissance we're going through right now, because we got this, we had Abigail this year.
We're getting Nosferatu.
We're getting Nosferatu in December. I'm loving this like just fun trend we're having with these vampire movies.
Horror films.
Yes. Okay, like horror movies don't always have to be like this, like trying to tell a message through the gore,
really dark and grim,
or just dark and grim, or just body horror for body horror's sake. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to have fun while you're watching it, and Lisa Frankenstein.
Yep.
I love that we're getting kind of like this renaissance of like the fun horror movies again. It definitely, like, the comedy in this movie is so good. Ben Schwartz is hilarious in this movie. He's hilarious in everything he's in, but especially in this one, playing off of Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult and Awkwafina. Just everyone melds together so well to make this movie as fun as it is. And even with all of the big laughs and all the gore, you still get a couple moments where you just kind of sit in it. Just there's a couple like heavy moments that you just kind of sit in and you just kind of feel what's happening, and then immediately right after that you're laughing again. And I love when movies do that kind of thing.
All right, so next is the classic Silence of the Lambs from 1991. This was one of those movies, Shelby says it a lot, this was one of those movies where I never knew a time when this movie, of course it came out before I was born, but it wasn't one of those that I got introduced to late in life. It's one of those, I've saw it, growing up a lot. It played on TV a lot. We rented it once or twice growing up. So there was never not a time when I wasn't aware of this movie. And it's always a fun one to go back to. It's the murder mystery going on, but at the same time we've got Hannibal Lecter being interviewed. Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins are great, of course. Got the famous lines from Hannibal, and we got the famous lines from Ted Levine's character. And it's just overall a very great horror movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I haven't seen any of the prequels and sequel movies and shows, so I can't give any thoughts on those. And I think Shelby has the same thoughts.
Pretty much. This is just a classic horror movie. It's kind of required watching if you are a horror fan. It is a lot of fun. I do really enjoy Anthony Hopkins in this movie. He is terrifying. Like, just sends shivers down your spine, terrifying. Now, before our most previous viewing of this last fall, I hadn't seen this movie in like 15 years. So I forgot a good portion of this movie. And I forgot one particular actress was in it, so it kind of took me out of it when she shows up. It's Brooke Smith, who is the current victim in the movie, the current kidnapped victim in the movie. And the only reason it took me out of it is because my mom and I are both really big Grey's fans, so the most recent thing I had seen her in was Grey's, and she played a character I didn't like, so the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, yeah, that's what you get. Which, that's not right. I shouldn't think like that, but my brain was just going, yeah, that's Erica Hahn. I don't like her. But the movie itself is a lot of fun. It's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. If you're going to show it to anyone on the young side, I would kind of maybe prepare yourself for some nightmares, because Hannibal is pretty scary himself.
And also some questions, because there's a cannibal in there, and that's not a trope that gets played out a lot nowadays.
Yeah. And, the whole fact, like, he's supposed to be working with the police at the moment, trying to, give, insight on how to find the current guy they're going after. So maybe prepare yourself to, have to explain why cops might do that sometimes. Might end up in some uncomfortable conversations. And then you might end up with the true crimer kid.
Yeah. Alright, so this next film is Sleepy Hollow. This is the Tim Burton 1999 version with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci in there, and I actually really enjoy this film. I like the style. Of course, I love just Tim Burton style. This is right before he's kind of started faltering and his movies weren't so great. This is also before. As much as I like Johnny Depp, this is before Johnny Depp started just playing
The same
character in all his films. This is before Pirates of the Caribbean became his main thing. So, and before he started really being a character actor, he was still a little low-key on this one as compared to later films where he really kind of hammed it up. But I still like I like the visuals. Christina Ricci, of course, is great in this. It has got a lot of big name people in it that were big at that time, and like then when, of course, later on, even in that same year for some of them, or just a couple years later, would be at even bigger things. So we got Michael Gambon, who most people know now
as the bad Dumbledore.
As Dumbledore. We got Richard Griffiths, who is
Vernon Dursley.
Yep. And of course we got Ian McDiarmid, who is Palpatine. This and of course Christopher Walken is the Headless Horseman, and it's just that's just some of the cast there. It's a great story. It is not the same story as the Ichabod and Mr. Toad one. It's instead of him being a teacher, Ichabod Crane is a doctor who's hired to find out why all these people are getting murdered and stuff, and he's still on the kind of weaker, squeamish side, and he's of course still frightened by a lot of, like, his own shadow, I guess, but that's kind of where it ends. Everything else is kind of something new in there, including the lore of the Headless Horseman. Your thoughts on the film?
It's good. I wouldn't say it's great by any means. it's an enjoyable watch, but again, like, they add so much to the story. It's kind of like the opposite of 1408. What they add to it doesn't really add to it. It's interesting enough. It's not one of my favorites. This is definitely more of a you movie, because you also just really like that aesthetic.
I do. Victorian Gothic style.
He really does enjoy that aesthetic. Me, on the other hand, I can take it or leave it. For me, I needed more connection to what was going on. There wasn't enough for me to, like, really grab onto and really enjoy. Because, again, like, Johnny Depp's Ichabod is just... It's not very well acted. Like, he doesn't do a good job as this character. Like, you can tell he hasn't really settled into how he wanted to portray it, or he was, like, being directed in a way that he didn't really want to do it. So it doesn't come off as he's really embracing the film or embracing the role. It's kind of, here's Johnny Depp. You guys recognize him from other things he's already done, because he's already done quite a few things by now. So yeah, and then once Christina Ricci, it's Christina Ricci. There's no real complaints. She's just good, and what you put her in something and it's good. Well, at least she's
True.
good.
True.
But yeah, it did just kind of feel a little lackluster in terms of performance. Like, I felt like half the cast was just phoning it in, so I didn't really get as into it.
All right, and next is another anthology film. One, of course, that Shelby does not like. This is Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, where it is, I believe it's still 4 stories, all interconnected over one story. This one being a boy is held hostage by a witch, played by
Debbie
Harry, and she is about to cook him, because, you know, witches eat kids, and so he's trying to just have more time, so he reads books from this book, or he reads stories from this book, and I feel like these are much more interesting stories. But for me, the Tales from the Dark Side was always a bit more interesting. Of course, it was, no pun intended, it was darker than other shows from the time, like Tales from the Crypt, or even like the Cat's Eye kind of thing. The stories always, from what I recall, always had a much more grim ending. Usually it never had like a, happy twist to it. So these all, of course, and unfortunately, this has some interesting people in it as far as cast. I mean, we've got Julianne Moore, we've got Steve Buscemi, and Christian Slater, all in as characters in these short stories the boy is reading. I grew up with this one, and it never terrified me. This is, of course, this is early 90s, 1990, I believe. So it still had a lot of those cool creature effects in it. I really like the gargoyle story probably the most, just because of the creature effects in it. I don't even know if you've got any thoughts other than you didn't enjoy it.
This one isn't so much that I didn't enjoy the individual stories, because the stories themselves were interesting enough. There wasn't enough for me to, like, really get into them. Like, they're entertaining, but I'm not necessarily going to pick this to watch when given a choice. Versus Cat's Eye, which I just never want to see again.
Fair enough.
Like, this one, if you put it on, I'm not going to, like, completely check out. I'll be interested enough. But I'm just not a big fan of anthologies. We've already talked about that. This one is a little bit better than others.
It's more balanced in regards to the style.
The tone and the style is more even, which makes it more palatable. Unlike Cat's Eye, where it's all over the place.
Yeah.
This one, there's a little bit more of an evenness in tone, so it's not giving you whiplash going back and forth.
Whereas, we didn't say this, but some of the stories in Cat's Eye are kind of played up more for laughs, whereas, and some of them are like more thriller or horror based, which Shelby was not a fan of. Whereas this is straight up, every single one of them is horror themed, and because they're Dark Side, they're all pretty dark in regards to style and tone. So, next, we're ending on our last three films here. So for y'all that have still stuck around to this time, thank you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed listening to us talk about the movies and giving our thoughts on them. And this is 2011's The Thing, starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead once again. And so when this movie came out, everybody kept thinking this was going to be a remake because there had been rumors for years up to that point. I think starting as early as like 2006 or 2007 that they were planning on making a remake of John Carpenter's The Thing, which at the time not a lot of people minded. I can think by the time the movie did come out, people were like, by then a whole bunch of other remakes had come out to where it was kind of, thought it was going to be bad. Some people still think this movie's bad. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and no, it is not a remake. It is a prequel. And it's a really interesting prequel because this movie literally leads up to the very beginning for John Carpenter's Thing. So you can watch this film from beginning to end and then pop in the classic John Carpenter's Thing and just continue the story. It's great. So it's the same story though. Alien and ice. Alien thaws out, starts mimicking everybody. It turns into grotesque versions of them. Creeps everybody out. What last man standing kind of thing happens, and yeah, and with this one, of course, the alien survives because it goes into the 1982 classic. So Mary Elizabeth Winstead, of course, being great as she always has ever been. I know building up to this movie, you said you don't, or us recording talking about this movie, you don't remember it?
I don't remember much of it. It didn't really stick with me all that much. To be fair, the thing itself, like the John Carpenter's The Thing, doesn't really stick with me all that much. I'm not a huge fan of these particular kind of alien movies. It was interesting enough, but just not super memorable for me. I do like that it leads straight into the original. Like, I do like that aspect of it. But it did feel kind of retreading old ground because it is just leading right into the original. Which is probably why I don't remember much of it. Because they both kind of meld together.
Fair enough. And then, as I said, leads right into the 1982 classic, John Carpenter's The Thing. And yeah, this is a classic. I've talked about this movie in length for my top 10 Halloween movies, so check out my thoughts there. But I mean, it's awesome acting, awesome creature effects. Kurt Russell and everybody does a great job. I have met some of the people that have acted in this film at a horror convention many years ago, and I forget which one it was that I spoke with the most, but he even had like this whole little album that he had of like behind the scenes photos that he showed me, just because it was like the end of the day at this horror convention. Everybody was pretty much packing up and leaving, and he was like the only one left, kind of still sitting there waiting for people to just ask for signed autographs. I never got his autograph, unfortunately. I don't even think I got a picture with him. I just came up to him and was just like, hey, wanted to let you know I really enjoyed you in the movie. And we just kind of started talking back and forth about the movie, and he's starting to gave behind the scenes stories and stuff, and he's just like, oh, takes out his little duffel bag behind the table there, and he's like pulling out this whole little photo album of, this is all there's the cast, and there's me, and all this stuff behind the scenes that you just don't ever see. It was amazing, and I'm like, I'm never gonna forget that. It was already my favorite horror movie at that time, and that just added a whole nother layer to it. You kind of already said you just don't care for this film in general anyways.
I don't, and it's not that it's bad. Like, it is an enjoyable movie. It just doesn't stick with me. When it comes to like the alien type movies, my go-to is Alien.
Mm-hmm.
So like this one doesn't stick with me all that much. The acting was fine, the effects are cool, but it just wasn't my thing. It was a little too slow for me to wait for everything to really get started.
You also don't like that the first death is a dog.
Yeah, that takes me out of it. This if you don't like pet death, don't watch this movie.
Yeah. Alright, so we're on to our last film. You know what? I'm going to let you have this one. Because I watched this one back when it first came out, and then I introduced you to it. But I've been doing a lot of talking about my thoughts and then how I introduced it. But I'm going to let you tell your thoughts first.
Okay, so this is one of the few anthology movies that I do really enjoy. And this is Trick or Treat. And it's all down to I love Sam. So this one, it's definitely more gruesome than a lot of the anthology movies, than any of the anthology movies we've talked about. Really, it's got some gruesome kills in it. But for me, the fun of it was it's all the same town, so all these stories are happening concurrently, so they're all happening at the same time. Whereas the other anthologies we've talked about, it's just somebody telling the story. This one feels more grounded because it's all in the same area. You can kind
On
of
the same night.
all on the same night too, so it all still feels connected, which is probably why I was able to enjoy it more. Also, Anna Paquin. Anna Paquin's in this movie, and I love Anna Paquin.
Yeah, so this has got a really big cast to it. Yeah, there's Anna Paquin, but they also got Brian Cox in it and Dylan Baker, among other people. Yeah, as Shelby said, this all takes place in one night, and the stories are interconnected. And some of the characters will like interact with other characters. Some of the stories are like just kind of in passing, or like you'll see one part of a story happening in the background as the current story is playing out, and then later on you'll see the same, the
other side
of that. Whereas, oh yeah, that was happening when this was going on, kind of thing. So it's great fun. This was originally going to have like a theatrical release, but like the last minute they decided, nah, we don't want to. It's going to get a direct to, I think it was a Blockbuster exclusive release. So that's how I found out about it. I rented it and fell in love with it, bought it immediately, and I've just watched it every year since. Of course, when I started dating my wife, had to show her it as well. She fell in love with it, and that was great. And that's going to be it for the horror movies. Next 2 months, we are going to talk... Well, actually, next month, because this is... the next video is going to be the end of October, which means we're going into the Christmas holiday season. So, end of November is going to be right around the corner, and we're going to talk about Christmas movies. So, stay tuned for that. And as we said, we will get back to talking about the Disney movies on New Year's Eve. So at least subscribe if you want to hear us talk about Disney movies in the future. And until next time, thank you and have a good day.
Talk to y'all later. Bye.